So the bed is now heated up to 60, the nozzle is 215. One thing I would say about the printer, just before I left, I changed the nozzle on it, and when you put a nozzle on a cold heat block, when the heat block heats up, it will loosen. So it's worthwhile on the on your one to then just use your little spanner. I've put one in the little toolkit. Just literally tighten it a little bit now that the hot end is heated up. If you're finding it difficult to get in there, I know I put a fan shroud on there, and you have to kind of peel back on your one. You've got a little black silicone sock. Peel it backwards, and you can reach it. But also, you can go into here, settings, move, and you can dial in about 100 on there, and it just brings the bed down enough that you can get in there. So once you've done that, you've obviously, as I say, you've got your SD card is in there with the file. Always put the SD card in the machine with the file before you start it up. Warmed up the bed. The next thing that you'll want to do, I'm hoping that the levelling hasn't gone too far out from travel, but it probably has. So you're going to go into levelling in the settings. And there is a video on YouTube that talks about levelling. I think I've stated which one it is on the central thing. But you'll probably, now that you've just received the printer, you may want to do it. But I'll show you how you can check if the levelling is out. So I'll just let this thing find its home. So it's just finding home. So to check whether the bed is still level, you can press measuring, and what it will do is it'll measure all 16 corners of the bed, and you'll come out with figures here. If your figures are less than 0.0 something, negative or not, then they're good. So to give an example, that is a good value, 0.002. This one's not so good, 0.156. I find this one a little harder to level, this machine, because it's floating in midair, whereas yours has 4 points. You can do it via the paper method, or I've put feeler gauges in your set. You want to pick up the 0.04mm feeler gauges. What you do is you start, make sure your Z home is right. And one thing I found since I did that video is actually remember how it feels when you find your Z home. You want it just to be gripping the feeler gauge, and remember how much tug. Sometimes I look at how much this bends when I'm pulling, like, you know, if there's resistance, it bends a bit. And if you remember how that feels when you go around to do the levelling on each corner, you'll find it easier to get it more accurate. Sometimes people use the paper. I've actually found the feeler gauges, I'm now trying, and it works better. I've managed to get your machine very nicely levelled, but it may be out because of travel. Anyway, when you've done that, you may not need to do it again for months and months on end, but what I do recommend is whenever you switch the printer on, just sometimes this bit will go blank if it can't remember what was already on there. So, and I find with this computer, it's got this printer, it's got a quirk where every time I switch it on, it seems to forget what it's done. So I press measuring, and I do that every time. And the way I understand it is it's almost each time you switch the printer off, it kind of forgets where the bed was. So it's reminding the printer where everything is, and you'll find it will start printing much better. As in, the Z offset won't be like, sometimes I find if I don't do this, Z offset is like up here or it's down here and it's scratching the bed. It's just all over the place. So do that first. Once you've done that, and if you've got nice figures, if the figures are out, then you may need to level the bed. But generally I find with that printer, once it's level, unless you move the printer, it won't really go out, and you'll always be checking it if you do this little move before you start printing. Sometimes I've left your printer on for days and you don't need to do that step. It's whenever you've switched it off, and whenever you're putting a new file on as well, you will have to switch the machine on and off for it to read the file. I don't know why it does that. I wonder if it's the little extension port that I put on yours that just makes it easy to stick in. For some reason it does that. It doesn't read it straight off. But rule of thumb, always start with your file on the SD card, printer off. Turn the printer on with the file in there. Warm up the bed, warm up the nozzle. Once they're up to temperature, you should have already fed your filament in there unless you've changed them. And then go to bed leveling and measure what the points are. If they're out, redo them. If they're not, you can then move ahead to press print and go. So I'll just wait for this to go, and I'll just see what happens when I press go on this, and you'll realise that it probably won't work. And that's the joy of these printers.